Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Clifford Murray, and here again is another rendering of Cliff's office. Last week I did a video, part one of Black Men Working in the Workplace. This will be part two. And if you recall in part one, the main underlying template, if you will, for that Black Men Working in the Workplace was centered around the foundational educational footprint of no education past high school was required. Part two is going to be different from part one in that Black men working in the workplace environment here will have an educational footprint, if you will, where experience and or a certification, a requirement of having an associate's or a bachelor's degree will be required in this aspect of Black men working in the workplace. I think I mentioned in the previous video, you had more of almost a slave plantation mentality centered around part one. And unfortunately, I've worked in both of these environments. And again, in the part one environment, noticing our young Black men and Black women, ridiculously pathetic. Everything from the Black men walking around, practically every one of them in those environments I've seen, I've worked in a few. Pants hanging off your ass, you look like you just got out of bed. Who cares about how my hair looks? All of the ratchet imagery of the Black community being manifested in some of these workplaces. Our young Black women, a lot of them have even seen fights break out and so forth with them in these manufacturing environments. Somewhat of just a ratchet slave plantation type of culture and environment that these companies who allow this to go on in that particular work environment seem to care less about how you look, how you conduct yourself, work integrity, coming to work late, doing what you want, going against all of the so-called rules set in place. And again, I described all of the hierarchy landscape, if you please. In most cases, hardly will ever see a Black male in any form of supervisory or leadership positions in those environments where you practically have an overwhelming percentage of immigrants, a strong, significant dose of females working in these environments. And in a lot of places I've seen, as well as the world doesn't revolve around me, but having asked questions and looked into other things with other men in places around the country, it's almost like a blueprint that's been set. All of the floor leadership, team leadership, what have you, overwhelmingly, not surprisingly, you probably see Black women in those roles. And another strong dose of immigrant personnel, Latino, Hispanic, Asian American, even our brothers from the diaspora in Africa make up that type of environment. And just all kind of unprofessional shenanigans go on in that particular environment. Over here in part two, where the environment would be defined more so along the lines of a professional type of environment. And as one might expect, you're not going to have a whole lot of young people 20, 25 and under, primarily because acquiring experience and or certification and needing to have an associate's or a bachelor's degree at minimum in some of these environments here, that's you're going to see a lot of people late 20s, early 30s starting out in most cases in these environments, and those personal displays of your civil liberties and wanting to wear your hair a certain way and dyed wild colors, and black men wanting to walk around with showing their ass and boxer shorts. Those type of freedom of expressions, that's not going to be the case over here in this type of workplace and workspace environment. And I'll deal with the overall culture of this type of environment in part two, black men working in this particular workplace. May not still see an overwhelmingly number of black men in leadership positions over here as well. There will, not surprisingly, you may come across still a mammy component in this particular type of workplace, where a black woman, and I've worked for black women in this type of an environment, where she's been my immediate supervisor and or she's over the entire department. In this particular environment, unlike in the type 1 environment where you practically, it's like a needle in a haystack. If you even see Becky, white America's daughter, that white girl who was born and raised in America, she's practically never found in part 1 those environments where you just need a GED. You will see Becky in the part 2 environment. Her presence will be known in these environments over here, where the educational footprint requires a certification, some type of degree and or special skill set. Becky's all over the place here. You still have a mammy component where a black woman may very well be your supervisor running the show. Still not going to notice a lot of black men in any supervisory role. And if you do, that black man, in more cases than not, will define what I've unfortunately have come to just realize. And even though it may be a hard pill to swallow for some of us, it seems as though black men with any type of supervisory leadership role, particularly in this type of an environment where he more than likely will definitely have to have a certification or a degree or some type of special skill set pertaining to his craft or his sense of business acumen to be a manager. It seems as though, notwithstanding, if God wants you in these positions, nobody's going to stop you. There's no ism in the world that's going to stop him. But generally, if a black man is operating at these levels of management and supervisory leadership roles, that white man who more than likely has allowed him to operate at this level, that white man cannot feel uncomfortable, irritated, or agitated in some type of way, and or feel intimidated forward / threatened by said black man. Seems like to me, just living this life and moving and walking through it. I've had some positions in my life where I have been that, not that black man who is beta male type coward, if you will, but I've certainly seen in my own personal professional career black men like me who exude what this channel is about. It's always a problem. There's always some type of tension or irritability, if you please. One of the things that I want to emphasize with this particular black man working in this type of workplace, even though you are a subordinate, though you have a degree or a special skill set or a certification, you are still a subordinate in a lot of cases to a white man that you have more education than he has. One of the things I found living life and moving through as a person, just as my uncle would say, may he rest in peace. You haven't seen enough sunsets and rainfalls to put that together by now? In large measure, significant measure, from my observation and talking to other black men, for there is a underlying vibe tension of when a black man, even though he's the subordinate, his white supervisor is making $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 more a year than him. But if that black man's got more education alone, let alone the propensity that everyone in the department, at the job, you name it, in the sphere of work, in these working environments, can obviously look at that black man and say, yeah, that guy should be running this. He could easily do this. He could easily do that. That still can cause tension in the workplace. I've even interviewed and come across some black women who have been promoted and elevated in these supervisory management positions. And like a lot of times, I'm not going to mention their names or the companies in which this happened, but have told me personally, so-and-so could have easily gotten that position. That brother had more experience than I did, and I was, quite frankly, expecting him to get promoted. They promoted me. This is a black woman telling me one time. Just being real and serious about the thing. And even they promoted me because, I'm a black woman. There are some black women out here who understand the dynamic at times where they know, as a woman, women in general, our Most High didn't even really put that into any man, regardless of his race or ethnicity. Men aren't intimidated and or feel threatened by a woman, generally speaking, just in the dynamic of living life. And there are some black women out here who don't necessarily fall in line with that. I'm a strong, independent black woman who doesn't need a man hear me roar mantra. We have a few of them who actually understand that. This particular black woman, they should have picked that brother, but they chose me, and I know why they chose me. Interesting dynamics, even over here in part two, black men working in the workplace. And no matter what environment you're working in, whether you have an educational footprint requirement like this, where you have to have a degree or a special skill set or experience that has the equivalent thereof, or whether you're working in the part one of black men working in an environment where you don't even need a GED. I've seen some situations in that where you can just get by on being healthy and strong, and these type of environments really require uh, more of the physical attributes than anything. You got a strong back. That's all we really need here. Doesn't matter what environment you're working in. If you are a black male, if you do not own the company, you are being watched even when you think you aren't. Another dynamic that will play out in this environment over here in the part two, professional, white collar, high end, blue collar, you're making a good 5-figure salary, in some cases hitting the 6-figure mark and so forth. No black supervisor, even that black woman. And I've seen a few black men in supervisory roles in some of these environments. I've been a black man with a supervisory role at a company where a lot of white subcontractors had to report to me and so forth. But anyway, one of the things you'll notice, black men, particularly you young black men, is that no black supervisor, from what I can see, what I've seen over my years of working, can ever fire a white subordinate. A black man, a black woman in a supervisory position, very rarely. It's rare. And I'm trying to think now as I'm just engaged in this video, have I ever seen it really? Don't think I have. Some of you guys can leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know if I'm crazy, if I'm off my rocker, but a black supervisor cannot fire a white subordinate. Unofficially, that's got to be checked and run through that white man who is running the entire show. Another part of the landscape in this environment, in this workplace environment, you're not going to see too much of an influx of an immigrant base, female base, depending on the particular type of industry you're working in. Now, I put an emphasis on the part one, those environments that don't require, in part one, that don't require an education past a GED, where you had a lot of immigrant, female, so forth. And a lot of these manufacturing environments that I've worked in, particularly ones centered around technical innovation, you will see a significant dose, from what I've seen, of Asian Americans working in this capacity, more so than I've seen with Latino Hispanic. You'll see a significant dose of Middle Eastern ethnic groups working in this particular dynamic than more times than not, as you will in the part one, where a education is not required. Some cases I've worked in where there were the black American demographic and the white American demographic were the minority, and a lot of technical, computer, innovative type of manufacturing production processes where you had engineers from Africa, of the African diaspora, from the Republic of Congo, Somalia, Nigeria. They've come to this country. They acquired an engineering degree or some type of business technological degree in technical management, so forth like that. Some of them I've seen working in human resources, along with Becky. Not too much of a Latino Hispanic demographic working here. Not that there's certainly Latino Hispanic people who have acquired higher education and working in several fields and stuff, but you tend to see more of the Middle Eastern, India, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, some of our African brothers and sisters, and certainly Asian American men working along these techno-oriented type of industries of manufacturing and processes and things of that nature. I've also worked with companies along the lines of utility companies. And a lot of that industry is still male dominated as far as out in the technical field, within the field, linemen, engineers, software technicians, scientists. And a lot of that industry, they're getting away from it a little bit. I know here in Charlotte, in some places where I've worked with one of the major utility companies here as a contractor with General Electric's contract group a long time ago, traveling around the country inspecting nuclear power plants. Department of Energy and Nuclear Regulatory commissioned regulated industries around the country where it's heavily dominated by men overall. And within that dynamic, white men dominating that industry. And a lot of places I've worked at Department of Energy and Nuclear Regulatory, nuclear plants and so forth around the country years ago, I was one of very few black men in that type of landscape as I looked around. Very, 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 very few black men working in that type of scenario. And yet and still, there was an overall culture that suggested things will be done this way, they will be done that way, and that's the way it's going to be. White men predominantly dominating those scenarios as well. I'm divorced now, but when I was married, and I have other family members who have worked in the banking industry, your white collar individual, if you please, and I can remember them talking to me about the demographic layout of things within banking and that aspect of corporate America. Not a whole lot of Latino Hispanic men and women working there compared to, again, Middle Easterners and Asian Americans working in those environments. And whether, seemingly, no matter what industry or culture, to see black men in leadership roles in those type of corporate settings, industrial, corporate hybrids, you name it, few and far between. And there does seem to be a sense of when you do see a black man working in any of these environments that require an education past high school, an overall projection from that black man falls within what I said earlier. Your supervisors, who will almost overwhelmingly be predominantly white men at the end of the day, cannot be made to feel uncomfortable, irritated, or agitated, threatened, and or intimidated in any way. Black men in these environments of any kind, whether you were in the part one environment or in the part two, definitely have to conduct yourself professionally, regardless of their race, age, or whatever. Black men, conduct yourself professionally at all times with regard to females in the workplace, no matter what culture you're in. You don't get, I'm going to use the word baited or tricked, but I think you know what I mean. Sometimes you can be baited and tricked, but I've told younger black men in particular, there are double standards everywhere. You'll never be able to do what a woman does in the workplace. No man will ever be able to do what a woman does in the workplace. And when you think about the menu item under sexual harassment, that meant when you punch up the menu item and let's see, sexual harassment, zero policies for that. I've seen some situations where a woman is having dialogue with the most sexually laced innuendo you can imagine. And men, particularly you black men, have joined, thinking it was okay for you to join into said conversation. And then before you know it, you're standing in the human resource office trying to explain your black ass. Don't go down that road with a woman who's talking and cussing and like a sailor, as we used to say, and you think, okay, well, with this one, it must be okay. Don't do that. Don't fall for that. Whether you're in the type part one environment or today's part two environment, doesn't matter. Don't be stupid. Don't be a stupid idiot thinking you can participate in any kind of illicit conversations that women can engage in. Well, nothing seems to happen to them. That's right. Nothing's going to happen to them in most cases. You even think about making some comments or some moves or some actions that a woman in the workplace thinks she's being violated or just feeling uncomfortable at all, your black ass will be in the human resource office and being processed out the damn door so fast it'll make your head spin. And you can think about all of the double standards and all of the other shit that's unfair while you're looking for another job. Well, this is Cliff's office. He's not being political. No, we're not politically correct over here. Part of our damn problem. Across the board in so many topics and outliers of black society, we actually have black America think that they're on par with white America, and we can do what white America does. It's kind of like that. You talk about a double standard. Men in general, let alone black men, can never do what women do in the workplace. Black America at large, if you haven't figured out by now over these 400 and something damn years, we can't necessarily do what they do. Another thing you should be aware of that I think is important moving in these areas of working in the workplace as black men. I may have mentioned it in the video before, but you're going to have to, if you want to continue to work for someone else, a lot of opportunities still will not be presented to you as readily as they will be presented to a black female and certainly a white male. So while you're in these environments and you want to endeavor to move up, or at least no matter what environment you're in, and I try to get the young black men, particularly from the part one scenario, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you need to come in here with the sense of taking the thing serious versus thinking it's an extension of high school. And that's certainly where they want to keep you young black men thinking that in those environments. You need to be looking around and paying attention to dynamics that are going on around you. Looking at how white America runs business, doing some research on things. Now, those of us in the part two environment, my God, you don't have to go to college to understand this, but when you're looking for a job, you're expected to, before that interview, if you get one, you've done research on the company. Depending on the position in which you're applying for, particularly upper management positions, you might even need to go as far as doing a SWOT analysis. SWOT is an acronym for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a particular company, weighed against their competitors and so forth. But you need to understand the culture of the company. Certainly, you'll try to go to Glassdoor, and even though they may or may not have put out a salary or pay rate for the position, you need to research that and see what the market bears in that position for this position. Again, depending on what position is a SWOT analysis, who founded the company, what is their mission statement, all of this and that, what type of upward mobility, if you can get some type of bead on an internal vibe of the company from a person who maybe works there. And now, while I'm thinking about that, reference comes to mind. I've gotten few jobs. One job I did get was because of a good friend and a former colleague. We worked together for years at other companies, and he was a good, viable reference. And he was in a position to, a brother, he was in a position to put my name in the hat to his white supervisors, and I was brought on board like that. Black men, when you are doing references, you need to make sure that reference is solid, is professional, and can articulate him or herself when potential employment opportunities come your way and you've written down. They normally will ask for 3 references. You need to make sure that first of all, you've communicated with the references about your potentiality for this job. You give them a call. Hey, man. Hey, girl, look, I'm looking at coming over here and doing so and so. We work together for blah, blah, blah. I'd like to get your permission to use you as a reference. Sure, Cliff, so on and so forth. But make sure the references you have are going to be intelligent and professional and articulative enough to where when said potential employer gives them a call, because believe it or not, like I say all the time, white people are always dealing at chess level and black people are always dealing at checkers. I've worked with some white men and women in human resources, and I have heard them say in the break room water cooler talk, man, that candidate had a good opportunity to maybe come on, but I talked to some of the references they gave, and I didn't like the references. They were, it's so many things that go on out here, gentlemen, in these environments that get your resume filed in a trash can quicker than you can shake a stick at, that get your opportunities at working in these positions thrown in the trash can faster than you can believe because of so many things. Did you fill out the application correctly? And over here in part 2, definitely going to have a resume. Part 1, you hadn't worked long enough to even put a resume in. So many times in those environments, your background check will be enough to suffice. And in some cases, I've seen in the part 1 environment where only a GED is required, even if you've had a felony on your background check, but he's got a strong back. Jeremiah can pick up these boxes. We'll still take him. But certainly over here in part 2, your background check, your resume, your punctuation, if you choose to utilize a cover letter. All of these things better be I's dotted and T's crossed. Even right down to the references you are using. So when they call your references are people who have their stuff together with respect to answering questions about what you will bring to the table for said company. You've always got to be thinking past the print, black men, unfortunately, on everything we do in American society. You always have to be one step ahead mentally. You have to be able to see things in a nothing personal, just business. Now, most things that affect black men in this country come right down to race. Man, everything in religion. Shut up. Shut the fuck up and listen. Let me say that again. Again, listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. Stop being the proverbial, your head is stuck in the ground. We need to pull our heads out of our proverbial ass and look at the writing on the wall. Is race going to play a part in every situation in life? For a lot of people, no. But for your black male ass, almost always in the high percentile, it does. But having said that, those few times where race isn't going to play a part in this particular situation, black man, you still need to have your shit together. I've worked with some black men who didn't understand. It's nothing personal, just business. White men even do that with other white men. That's right, I've seen some white men actually let some white men subordinates go. But in more times than not with them, their hands were really forced to let them go, and or that white man had definitely done something to go against the grain and affect the bottom line. What do I mean by the bottom line? Money, money, money. We live in a capitalistic society that's run by white men overall in general. And at the end of the day, they'll look the other way, that way, in a million damn ways and forget about shit from Shinola long as that damn bottom line is coming in and revenue is adding to the bottom line. So when expenses are subtracted from revenue and what's left equals a profit versus a loss, most companies don't give a damn about anything. But if you're doing stuff, whether you're white, black, male, or female, in a lot of cases, things are going to fall in line with nothing personal, just business. I'm working with some black men who don't even understand and see things through business acumen. Some of them are 40-something years old, still running around playing stupid ass games. You don't understand how that would work, brother? You don't understand how something as simple as not calling in, we didn't know where you were, what you were doing. You know, you're 40-something years old. You're supposed to be a professional. You've worked long enough, you would think by now, to understand some things and how things work, just from a business standpoint. Black, white, male, female, young or old, just from a business standpoint, your black ass should just simply understand this is how the market does. This is how businesses are run. This is how the competitive nature of this and that has to be done. Again, overwhelmingly, most black people are going to work for white-owned, run by men corporations anyway. So rather than getting upset about a lot of shit that you can't control, the very least you can do is understand how business dynamics play out and how you as a black man are going to have to conduct yourself, maneuver, what have you. And I'm talking to brothers who you don't even have to be a sellout. I'm talking to brothers who you exemplify a lot of the characteristics on what this channel is about. And that's great. You also need to understand and have a view of business acumen and how things are going and how things are run through business. And unfortunately, I'm running into a lot of black men who don't even seem to get that. Now, in part one, you're still going to have some shit to deal with by being a black male. Part one, or today's part two, you're a black male. You're always going to be watched, even when you think you aren't. That's going to be universal no matter where the hell you go if you don't own the company. Then you need to understand a sense of business acumen. You need to understand that if you want to move and excel, if it's even possible, how you go about doing that, making your own opportunities as best you can. If not, look to own your own company and try to deal with and handle that in regard to what your true purpose in life may be. I don't know. That's between you and the Most High. And by all means, you certainly have to factor him in. A lot of black men I'm noticing, do you even factor him in at all in your life? Those of us who want to be the alpha male, alpha king, if you will, that's one of the first tenets we understand. And whether you're of that 14 and 19 core foundational, my age or older, that divot is what we like to do in Empowerment for Tomorrow. You have to utilize that discernment, intelligence, and balance throughout your whole life. So these are some of the things a black man has to do. Over here, we talked about part two and established some of the differences here versus part one. But as a black man, you're going to have to handle your business, understanding culture, understanding business acumen, where you fit, and how you have to conduct yourself in the type of image that you want to project in who you are and what you want to be in said environments. I trust part two has been a blessing to you. Went over some things and weighing them against some things we saw in part one. Next week, I'm going to be dealing with some things, and normally I'd file this under no nonsense while I'm even looking at it. And the video probably won't be that long. I'm going to do a little bit more research on it. But now I'm seeing some crazy shenanigans come to the kind of mainstream media. A lot of times when I see things on mainstream media, which is to say white media, and if it's even gotten to that, I might raise my eyebrow. And with everything in me, I'm always concerned about black first. Now, how is Black America viewing these things? And there's some crazy shenanigans coming around through cultural, social dynamics with this crate challenge shit. I think I even saw a few weeks ago during the preseason of football where head coach Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers got on one of his players for participating in this social thing that's running around the country with a crate challenge, where apparently you're walking up and trying to come down a bunch of milk crates or so forth that have been set high. I don't know if there's money involved if you win the crate challenge or not, but the point is you could certainly injure yourself. And I think Mr. Tomlin's thing was, you're a football player. It wouldn't matter if you're a football player or not. If you're working for someone else, or you're a man or a woman who you have responsibilities to, maybe a spouse or children or something, your mother or father, you're participating in some of these shenanigans. You could get hurt or whatever. Now what? You're not an asset to what we're trying to do. And now I'm seeing the crate challenge thing come up. So give me a chance to investigate some of this ridiculous shit. And God forbid, I can only hope, but I might find myself being frustrated when I dig into it and discover once again something ridiculous and stupid that has our black people, and it may very well have our young black people, gravitating to shit that doesn't make any damn sense, which unfortunately is something Black America tends to do, with being distracted and so forth. All of the things we've got to do and concentrate on, and somehow we can get taken off the prize, if you will, on what we need to be doing. And something is voting rights, and what Black Lives Matter is doing in those other videos I talked about for distractions and deflection and things like that. That's one thing. Let me just look at this crate challenge and see what the hell is going on. Something as ridiculous as that may be, oh, that's just a blip on the radar, forget about it. And unfortunately, with my folk, something like that can take hold of aspects of Black America and have us doing all crazy shit. So let me find out and see what the hell's going on with this, and the potential and or how it's affecting us. I believe it was a black player. I don't know if he was a superstar for the Steelers or not, but Tomlin had to say something about it, like a crate challenge. Anyway, till next week, I love you more than you know. Thank you.